Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for tonight's Climate Action Workshop. I'm seeing some new faces, some familiar faces, which is wonderful. But while we wait for some folks to trickle in, I do encourage you to introduce yourself in the chat. So perhaps with your name, your pronouns, profession, and what you're most interested in learning about tonight, and we will get started shortly. Awesome, I see folks are coming in. This is wonderful. And I do want to make a quick note that this meeting will be recorded. So if you don't feel comfortable showing up on video, that's totally okay. And I encourage you to turn your video off, but just wanted to put that out there. This will be live streamed to our Facebook page and it is being recorded. It may end up elsewhere. So just wanted to put that out there. All right, so feel free to keep introducing yourselves in the chat. No harm in doing that. But again, good evening. It is so wonderful to see you all. While this will be Senator White and I's 11th climate event together, it is our first virtual event. So it's such a pleasure to be here with you in Zoom land, and we look forward to talking climate with you this evening. So before we dig into tonight's program, we will start with some introductions, and I will kick us off. So my name is Jordan Heiden. I use she, her pronouns, and I am VPIRG's Keep Vermont Cool campaign manager. For those who are not too familiar with the campaign, we launched over a year ago at this point. And so far we have mobilized over 15,000 Vermonters into taking climate action. And we have achieved that through our online engagement opportunities, over 70 virtual and in-person events, and of course the VPIRG Summer Canvas, where canvassers knocked on over 65,000 doors this past summer. And possibly at yours, you may have seen them. Of course, you can learn more about our campaign at keepvermontcool.org. We are also on all of the social medias, but that is not exactly why we're here this evening. And I can say that's probably enough about me. So I will pass it over now. It is both an honor and a privilege to introduce Senator Becca White, who continues to inspire and motivate us on a daily basis. I'm so grateful to get to work alongside her, and without further ado, I will pass the baton over to her.
Oh, thank you, Jordan. And hi, everybody. It's so cool to see everyone's names starting to pop up in the chat and to see we're still getting people that they're admitting in from the waiting room. So that's awesome. Yes, I'm Rebecca White. I have been in the State House for the last 4 years as a state representative for Hartford, and then recently elected to be one of the Windsor County District state senators. And I'm also excited. I'm a big fan of the work that has gone into the Keep Vermont Cool campaign, and it's nice to be able to not drive to an event tonight, so we can all take some collective thumbs up for our no carbon emissions learning tonight. And one other thing I want to let the group know about is that I'm the co-chair of the Climate Solutions Caucus, representing the Senate side, along with Gabrielle Stebbins, who is on the House side. So that's what brings me to this work and one of the things that you should know about me. So yeah, take it away, Jordan.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Becca. So just to give you all a sense of what to expect this evening, I will quickly talk through our agenda. So again, we are kind of doing our welcome and introductions. That will continue in just a moment. From there, we will dig into our first activity of the evening. It's not intimidating or scary in any way, so you don't have to worry about that. From there, I will dig into more about the climate impacts that we are facing here in the state of Vermont. And then I'll pass it back over to Senator White to lead an election overview. From there, we'll talk 2023 climate policy priorities, and we've got some exciting updates to share on that front as the legislative session is well into motion at this point. And then we will break out into 4 different breakout rooms. It's going to be lots of fun. It will be interactive. You'll get to chat with legislators. And then once we come back, we will conclude with the Q&A and talk next steps. So we've got a lot to pack into a short amount of time, but I think you're going to love it, and we're really excited. So as we do with all of our events, we'd like to just take a moment now to recognize the Indigenous peoples of Vermont, as many of us are gathering on traditional Native territory here this evening. So of course, we do acknowledge them as the past, present, and future caretakers of this land, which includes the lakes, rivers, forests, and just so much more. So I do encourage you all to seek out additional resources and to get involved by visiting the Vermont Indigenous Heritage Center and the Abenaki Arts and Education Center, either online or in person. So next, I will pass it back over to Senator White to lead a few more introductions. I do want to quickly note that Representative McGill did have a family emergency that just recently came up, so she is unable to join us this evening, but she does wish that she could be here, and we're hoping to see her soon and wishing her well with her family. So just wanted to put that out there, and again, I will pass it back over to Senator White.
Okay, I don't know if Representative Buss is back in the Zoom building, but I'm not seeing her. So I'm going to start with Representative Esme Cole. So if you haven't met Esme, you're missing out. Representative Cole has the Hartford seat. She's in the 2-seat district that I used to have. And I have already told her this, but to this group, I have gotten so much goodwill from getting Esme to run for office. Like, it is a personal point of pride. People come up to me and are like, thank you for getting Esme. So she's already doing our town proud from Hartford, and she serves on the the newly named committee. You can tell us all about it. But food resiliency is something that she brings to this work, and she's a dynamite person to have in the house. So Esme, would you mind briefly introducing yourself?
Becca, I am so incredibly flattered from that introduction. And I'm really excited to be here, and thank you all for putting this together. I know it has been a lot of work, and I'm so impressed by you traveling across the state and this just being the cherry on top with this Climate Keep Vermont Cool initiative. It's been a wonderful way to bring folks together, and especially to get constituents in touch with their legislators. So that has been one of the greatest points of appreciation I've had for this event. Becca provided a fabulous introduction. This is my first term as a legislator. I have ginormous shoes to fill, obviously, and I am trying to ride on the tails of Becca's climate train and a path that she has paved. I've been attending the Climate Caucus meetings at the State House and learning a lot there. I am, as she mentioned, on the Agriculture, Food Resilience, and Forestry Committee. So that is a very climate heavy committee there. And hopefully I'll be able to use my voice to leverage our climate needs in that group. And I'm just really excited to continue to get to know you all. Thank you for being here.
Thanks, Representative Cole. And then next up, we have Representative Jonathan Williams. Jonathan is he's already working. Like, he's already got bills in motion, folks. It is so rare to see a first-time state rep just jump in with fantastic, like, already drafted, trying to get co-sponsors, bits of legislation. And maybe he only talks to me about the climate change related ones, but it seems like there's a lot of climate change related work that he's already trying to spearhead. So that's pretty cool. And, you know, Representative Williams has a history in local government, and I had the pleasure of being in his city, his town, in Barrie, to do an introduction for another Keep Vermont Cool event. And you could just see that everyone was excited to have him in the State House representing them. So it's great to have you again, Representative Williams, to hang out with us virtually. If you wouldn't mind introducing yourself to the group.
Sure. Thank you, Senator White. So good to be here tonight with everyone. I am Jonathan Williams, rep from Barrie City, alongside Representative Peter Anthony. You know, caring for our shared environment as stewards of Vermont is certainly a top priority for me. It relates to literally everything that we do. In my day job, I work for the Vermont Food Bank, and certainly climate resiliency is food security. And I have been appointed to the Committee on Commerce and Economic Development, which certainly fostering a green economy in our state is essential. moving forward. So I'm so happy to be here tonight. Thank you very much.
Hey, and thank you, Jonathan. And I don't know if we got Representative Buss back in the building. She is in Plymouth, Vermont, and Woodstock, Vermont. So I know the internet there can always be a challenge. So if she arrives, she will raise her hand, or we will flag her down and introduce you to her. And if not, you know, again, another climate strategy is good internet. So thanks, Jordan. Oh, and my snowplow has arrived, so I'm going to mute.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. So we have reached our first prompt of the evening. So you can take a moment now and think about an answer to the following question. What do you think is the most important issue for Vermont to tackle on climate? It's okay if you need to think for a moment. It's okay if you have a few ideas and you can't pick one. Go ahead and type them in the chat so everyone can see. The Zoom chat will be saved so we can share these responses with legislators throughout the state. That way, our elected leaders will gain a better understanding of their constituents' concerns and ideas. So take a moment to do that now and let us know if you have questions.
Oh, got some good answers.
Coming in hot. I love it.
Yeah, they are coming in hot. Oh. People, you guys can type fast.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Wow. Ashley Adams, you type fast. Okay. I will say I am really intrigued to know what the mountain goat is that Anne mentioned in Manchester. So at some point, maybe Anne could end up in my breakout group. I want to hear what that is.
Senator White, the Mountain Goat is an incredible little outdoor store.
Ah, okay.
Lots of cool merches there, including the Keep Vermont Cool merchandise and apparel.
Oh, I didn't even know this. This was not planned.
It's really not. It's really not. But we got to take all those opportunities, right?
Get it. Yeah. Okay. Oh, some interesting. Oh, and we got Randolph. Hey, Gary, look at this. Cool.
I love it. Yeah, this is incredible. Feel free to keep popping in those answers. Like I said, it's okay if you have more than one. It's possible that you probably do. And this will be saved. So all of your chatting will not go to waste. It will be shared. So really important for us to collect and for our legislators to see. So thank you. And feel free to keep typing as we go along. But I think at this point, it's a good time to switch gears and discuss what climate impacts look like here in the state. So this portion of slides serves as an opportunity to really set the table. So to create a baseline understanding of what's happening while providing some helpful insights and data for moving forward. And for those who have come to some of these in-person events, you will notice that some of these slides do look a little bit familiar, but you don't have to worry because we've got some new updates to share as well. All right, so because you're participating in this workshop tonight, we are likely on the same page about a few things, right? So for instance, we know that climate change is real, we know that it's happening, and we know that it's happening here at home. So it's also probable that you have noticed or directly experienced many of the following. Winters are getting warmer, and summers are getting hotter. We're seeing more flooding, and strangely, also more drought. There's species loss, algae blooms, heat waves, air quality warnings, tropical storms, ticks and Lyme disease, mental health crises, and a mass migration, which brings a lot of opportunity to the state, but with it, a housing crisis that's making it difficult for folks to find a home. And let's also not forget this Vermont fall that has felt a lot like summer, which was a very pressing reminder for Election Day that we need to take action. All right, and this isn't just based on observation, it is backed up by science. And in 2021, the University of Vermont released the Vermont Climate Assessment to shed light on the issue of climate change and exactly how it's impacting our state. So I won't dig into this climate assessment too deeply tonight. It is quite lengthy. However, I do highly encourage that you check it out. It's very easily accessible online, very, very useful and informative. But for tonight, I will discuss some basic relevant findings that you might find within this assessment and within others. So first, as I mentioned, winters are getting warmer. Average winter temperatures in Burlington have increased over 7 degrees on average since 1970. And because of that, we're seeing a lot less snowfall, shorter winters, and earlier ski mountain closures. This means we have less time to enjoy our favorite outdoor winter activities. And of course, let's also not forget that Vermont relies very heavily on winter tourism. Of course, this doesn't just affect us, it also affects the plant and animal life that surrounds us as well. And summers are warming up to over 3 degrees on average since 1970. And I know that may not sound like a lot, but it can make a really big impact on our environment and those who are living in it. A small increase in temperature can have really devastating impacts. And I know that I've personally felt the heat this summer and fall and winter, and I certainly can't imagine a Vermont that only gets hotter over time. I'm really here because I love the changing of the seasons, and I enjoy fall and winter as much as I enjoy spring and summer. I don't want to lose out on that special variety, and I know that I'm not alone in that. Though I am also very grateful that we've had some snowfall these past few days. I was really, really missing that, and again, I'm sure I'm not alone in that either. All right, so these severe heat increases can also do a huge number on the human body. So environmental degradation, severe weather, water and food supply impacts, pollution, and really so much more can play a really serious role in impacting human health. These issues can lead to developmental and reproductive harm, asthma, lung cancer, cardiovascular harm, susceptibility to infection, and unfortunately, premature death. And it's also so important to mention that while we are all impacted, BIPOC communities, low-income Vermonters, and youth, seniors, and folks requiring accessibility support are most disproportionately impacted by climate change. But again, of course, at the end of the day, this is something that we are all facing. It's an issue for each and every one of us. So we do have a lot at stake and more than enough reason, I believe, to take action. All right, so I feel like this is an important slide because it is a constant conversation piece that comes up literally all the time. Is climate change naturally occurring, or are we responsible? Now, some small degree of change is natural, that is true. But science finds that the vast majority comes directly from human activity. So what we're experiencing here and now is a direct impact and a direct result of the things that we have done in our everyday lives. And there are dozens of graphs and data sets that will tell you this exact same thing. So again, it's something that comes up a lot. I just wanted to address it because there is a lot of confusion at times about whether this is something that we have done or something that is just natural and, you know, a part of life. But I can say that we have hugely contributed to everything that we are facing here in this moment. All right, so what exactly does that human activity look like here in the state of Vermont? Transportation is the largest carbon emitter, accounting for 40% of all emissions within the state. Vermonters drive a lot, and we often drive pretty far. Here in the state, we also drive a lot of trucks, so it's pretty easy and simple to see how we can get up to 40% in emissions on that. But closely following transportation is heating at 34%, which is the way we heat our homes. It just naturally makes a big impact. But I will say that folks are working incredibly hard to address these areas in the current legislative session, which you will hear more about very soon. And again, to be clear, we want our climate policy to be as inclusive and accessible and affordable as humanly possible. So this shift into a more sustainable state should excite and benefit folks. It shouldn't pose as any kind of burden. So I want to make that extremely clear as well. And just for visual context, we do have a lot of work to do. We need to significantly cut back on emissions in order to meet the goals of the Global Warming Solutions Act. And if you're not familiar with that term, that's okay. You're going to hear more about it soon. But essentially, this graph is really showing us where we are and where we need to go very quickly. And just a few more slides from me before I switch it over. But I will close out on a positive note. There is a lot of good news. It turns out that Vermonters care a whole lot about what's going on with climate. And the vast majority of Vermonters are deeply alarmed about the climate crisis. Now, this data set was built around the Global Warming 6 Americas framework, which is an audience segmentation tool developed by Yale and George Mason universities that essentially places folks on a spectrum of climate concern. So you have on one side, the alarmed subset, the folks who care a ton about the climate crisis. They're deeply engaged, deeply involved. They want to find, some sort of success story out of this. They want to do the work. And then on the other side of that spectrum, you've got the dismissive. Those are the folks who possibly endorse conspiracy theories that climate change is a hoax. They are not showing up to this kind of webinar unless it's to say something that they feel about it. Right. So that's sort of the way that this augmentation tool works. And of course, you've got folks that are sprinkled in the middle because, again, it is a spectrum. So that's just a little bit of context of how this framework was developed and how it works. And for further reference, VPIRG conducted a rather large poll a little over a year ago using this segmentation tool to better understand Vermonters' attitudes towards climate change. And a more detailed look at our polling shows what this breakdown looks like in the state of Vermont as compared to the United States more broadly. And in the United States, roughly 26% of the population is alarmed about climate change, whereas 47% of the Vermont population feels that exact same way, almost doubling the country's average. So I think it's really wonderful that we live in a state where nearly half the population is deeply engaged and alarmed about this issue. And we know what that means for mobilization and policy. So the next step is to take all of that energy and to use it to truly act on climate. And then finally, a year ago, when Vermonters were asked what their top concerns were, climate change ranked at number 6. Fast forwarding to this past July, climate change moved all the way up to number 2 overall and number one among Democrats. We also saw a ton of positive movement during the recent midterm election, which you'll hear more about in just a few minutes. And of course, it is also important for me to note that these polls are not exactly apples to apples comparison. They were completed by different pollsters, but regardless, it is clear that climate is becoming a more pressing issue in the minds of Vermonters, which is really, really exciting. We have a lot of great energy to work with, so it's all positive news. But for now, I will pass it over to Senator White to talk more about local progress.
Great. Thank you, Jordan. Okay, you guys are popping off in the chat already. I love it. I love to see some engaged climate debate already. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about the great work that happened this campaign season, and then what we're working on already this legislative session. Next slide. Oh, perfect. Okay, so this group already, based on the names I've seen and the chat conversation, you're probably already familiar with the work that happened with the Global Warming Solutions Act, the GWSA. So back in 2020, we passed the GWSA, which turned our climate goals out of goals into requirements. So those requirements then we had the Climate Council that was created, and they created something called the Climate Action Plan. So steps and a guide to how we can not only meet our carbon emission reduction goals and our greenhouse gas emission goals, but ways that we can do it sector by sector. Really innovative stuff. And the Climate Council, just in case you're not familiar with that group, it's still going, and it's a nonpartisan appointed group of folks. What you should also know about the work that has been done around climate change is that we don't come at this just from the angle of it's the right thing to do, although it is to respond to our obligations around carbon emission reduction. We're also talking about some important economic benefits that will happen if we proactively respond, and then some very dire economic problems if we do nothing. And to reiterate something that Senator McCormick, my seatmate, says often, no plan is still a plan. And unfortunately, no plan in the case of climate change will cost us a significant amount of money. And the reductions that we could see could actually net benefit us over $6.4 billion as a state. And this comes from an organization called the Joint Fiscal Office, or JFO, which is a nonpartisan group that advises the legislative and executive branch around fiscal analysis. So we use them to help shape our budgets. They're not like an organization that is a think tank or anything. They're a very independent organization that supports legislative work, and they're known as the JFO in shorthand whenever you're in the building. And I want to tell you a bit about some of the things that happened last session that we'll be building on this year. The first of which is the environmental justice policy. The EJ bill was passed. And the EJ bill that we worked on created a screen that we will use to look at legislation throughout the coming years. And it also brought Vermont up to where a lot of other states were, because we actually are one of the last states to have an environmental justice policy. So it's good that we're finally there. Next slide, please. Okay, or I should say next article, please. So we also had something called the Clean Heat Standard. I've already seen folks commenting about the Affordable Heat Act, so that means you know about the Clean Heat Standard. While that bill, I'm happy to get in more details on from last session, the headline news that you should know is that we worked exceptionally hard on it. It was passed out of the House, passed out of the Senate, vetoed by the governor, and then ultimately came back and was almost overridden. But by one vote, we lost the override of that veto, which we will not do on other important climate policy moving forward. That is what we are working on. Next article, please. Then something near and dear to my heart was the Transportation Innovation Act. As Jordan noted, transportation is our largest carbon emitting sector as a state, and we have a bunch of work that we have to do. So the TIA bill was melded into the T bill, or the transportation budget bill, and it did two cool things. It first off was a different strategy than we've ever taken with climate change related work in the transportation bill. It was a way that we created a piece of legislation before we saw the administration's budget. So instead of nibbling at the edges of their budget like we normally do, they knew what we wanted, and then they had to respond to it in a sense, in a way that they never did. The second really important thing about the TIA, not only was it a great strategy, but it had important policy changes like bike and ped infrastructure, improvements to how we have public transportation with fare free continuing throughout the state. And it also included incentives for electric vehicles, e-bikes, all of the electrification of our transportation system that we keep talking about. And I've already seen many of you mention in the chat as a go-to strategy. Next article, please. Oh, okay, here we go. Now is the time to act. And I believe there's a video that is coming. And this is, in fact, Jordan texted me earlier and she said she will stream this video. And I'm not going to tell you why that's funny. You're going to have to watch the video to get why streaming it is funny. But whenever you're ready, Jordan, you can, there we go.
All right, so assuming you can all see that okay, correct? Senator White, is that true? You can see the fish on the screen.
The answer is yes to the fish is on the screen. Get it?
Perfect.
Streaming? Okay.
Let's go.
Vermont state fish, the brook trout, can only survive in cool, clean water. Much like the brook trout, Vermonters rely on a clean, healthy environment, but unlike the brook trout, Vermonters can vote. In the 2022 election, Vermont voters made their voices heard, electing strong majorities of pro-climate candidates across the state. Vermonters love the great outdoors, but climate change threatens so much about what makes our state special. The environmental community knows that we need leaders who will take strong action on climate. It takes collaboration, coordination, and commitment, which is why together, Vermont conservation voters and VPIRG Votes worked hard to support pro-environment candidates and educate voters on where their leaders stand on the climate crisis. This election season, we went all out. Recruiting and training candidates, hosting forums and debates, financially supporting candidates, hitting the phones, radio, and digital media, and knocking on doors like never before. Now, it's time to get to work on building a just, equitable future for every Vermonter. We can bring hundreds of millions of dollars of federal investments into Vermont to benefit our families and businesses. We can put thousands of Vermonters to work, build renewable energy, weatherize our homes, and modernize our electric grid, improve the way we get around, and support communities most impacted by climate change. So, to protect those who voted and those who can't, now is the time to act.
Very cool. Very, in fact, so cool. It's keeping Vermont cool. I'm so ready for bad jokes, folks. I'm sorry. Okay, so you saw the video. You get it. It was a lot of work, but work that paid off this campaign season. Huge shout out to the folks who went door to door, who made phone calls, and those efforts did not go unrewarded. The thing that you should know about the 2022 election is that it was a climate election win. So we had some of the highest turnout in Vermont history in a midterm. I believe it was 52% of Vermonters voted. Don't quote me on that, but that was, I believe, back in my head, the right percentage. That's awesome. And we also took back some seats that we had lost where there were folks who weren't as motivated on climate as the person who has actually won that election and is serving now. Some great examples of that are Representative Catherine Sims, who got reelected, but she was in a tough district where her district had been changed and she was going against another incumbent. So Catherine Sims came out on top there, climate champ. We had Representative Carl Demrow, who won a seat back in a very clear race around climate. And then we saw folks like Senator Irene Renner, who won her election and is another person who is prioritizing climate. So really cool. And not only were there wins when it comes to people getting elected, there was also, there's always this fear or buzz that if you talk about climate in rural parts of the state, that somehow you'll be penalized for that voters don't care about it, or that if by talking about it, you're going to alienate some voters, when the truth is the exact opposite. Is we saw folks get reelected with even better margins, and all of the strange carbon tax, anti-climate rhetoric fell flat. So really cool, and it means that we can move forward on policies like the Affordable Heat Act, like a Take Two, that would be on the clean heat standard, and actually get some work done and override a veto with even less risk of it getting vetoed or being able to miss those votes. So over 100 folks actually supporting it. Next slide, please. And we added a check mark to this slide because, guys, the Advanced Clean Cars and Trucks rule passed. So that went through a process through a committee called LCAR, which is our rules, how we do our rules policy in Vermont. It's the Advanced Clean Cars and Trucks initiative is coming from California, and it gives us priority for manufacturers to send us electric vehicles or zero emissions vehicles, which can mean something a little different than electric vehicles. But that means that Vermonters who are seeking out EVs will have a better opportunity, a better selection of EVs because we have joined we have signed the Advanced Clean Cars and Trucks initiative, which is phenomenal. Next up, we have the Affordable Heat Act. That's a big priority this session. As we've alluded to already during this presentation, it is a new take on the Clean Heat Standard Bill of last biennium. It still has the Clean Heat Performance Standard, which you'll remember from the bill, but it's made some important changes. And as I said in an interview earlier in the week, the affordable heat piece of this bill, that title, it's not just symbolic, it's not just messaging. The goal of the bill is to make sure that low and moderate income Vermonters are prioritized in our transition away from being fossil fuel dependent. And I'm happy to dig deeper in on what the Affordable Heat Act does if you have questions. But for now, going to keep it a little high level. Next up, we have the Renewable Energy Standard. Back in 2015, we passed the RES bill, the first Renewable Energy Standard bill, and now we have some work we need to do. And in fact, some of you already noted it in the comments. We need to start prioritizing in-state renewable generation and being transparent about what is considered renewable energy and what is not. And that'll help us meet our carbon emission reduction goals, grow our economy, and have local homegrown renewable where people want it to be. And I won't go much deeper on that, but I did appreciate, it looked like there were some comments around NIMBYism. And I think that we are going to have to tackle that pretty head on in the next few years about how do we make sure that Vermonters are having renewable energy development where they want to see it, where it's desired, but also making sure that we're building enough of it to actually meet our goals. That's how it happens. Next slide, please. And that's going to bring us to 100% cleaner cars, 100% cleaner heat, and 100% cleaner electricity. Next slide. Okay. Oh yeah. So let's give you a couple updates about the Affordable Heat Act. I asked Jordan to make this slide because it came up throughout the Keep Vermont Cool tour when we were in person going around the state, and we hadn't yet started the session. The bill hadn't been introduced, but we had questions around biofuels. We had questions about renewable natural gas, all of the things that I believe if you are following along closely and you want the best bill, you want the bill that meets our climate goals and at the strongest possible way, these are the things you're looking out for. So what we have developed in S5, the Affordable Heat Act, AHA, is first you'll see a change to have something called a carbon intensity score. A carbon intensity score will essentially cap the way that we are using biofuels as a solution to transition off fossil fuels and tamper it down over time so that the percentage of use of biofuels goes down over time. It also shows how not all biofuels are created equal. There's different carbon intensity scores for different types of biofuel. So it takes that into account, and the credits that a fossil fuel dealer or an obligated party could earn is dependent on the carbon intensity score of the measure that they're using. So that in layman's terms means the worse the biofuel, the less credit you get for it, the better the biofuel, the lower that you're using fossil fuels, the better your credits are. So really trying to get at how do we not solidify biofuels as a main solution to transition us from fossil fuels, but instead a stopgap that we stop using and we target to move down over time. Then the other piece I want to mention is renewable natural gas has come up. We have some language specifically in the bill that calls out renewable natural gas and the creation of the program to take into account not to overuse renewable natural gas and to be wary of it in my words. So a couple changes there, and I'm always open for more discussion on them, but know that those changes were made to reflect some important things that we heard from constituents, but also to make sure that the bill is something that will pass. So next slide. And equity. We got to talk about it. We already spoke about the environmental justice bill, but equity for Vermonters who are in vulnerable situations, when we think about lower income Vermonters, We think about folks who are going to be hardest hit by climate change. We also want to make sure that whatever we're doing when it comes to climate policy, that we're not ignoring whether it be race or able status, or anything that would typically lead to someone being more disenfranchised if we're not prioritizing them. So we need to keep equity at the forefront. And that's what all the legislation that we're working on this session takes into account. So very important. And I think that's the last slide, because Jordan, this is the best part of the whole night. Like, this
No,
is the
it
fun
really
part.
is. Yeah. This is the part of the workshop that folks get really, really excited about, because they get to talk to people, particularly with legislators. So very exciting stuff. And in just a moment, you are going to possibly be added into a random breakout room. We did pre-assign, but in case you possibly logged in with a different email, or maybe we just didn't catch you in time, you may have the option of choosing a breakout on your own. So this will be a fun little adventure. You may get added into a room, or you may not. We'll figure it out together. It's going to be great. You're going to have about 10 to 15 minutes or so to talk with a legislator that is in your breakout room. And we do have a few guiding prompts to get you started. So first, what does effective climate advocacy look like? Second, what does ineffective climate advocacy look like? Again, this should get the ball rolling and get you all thinking. Of course, you can feel free to ask one another other types of questions and share resources and ideas. We will have some breakout moderators in each room should you need any help or have any questions about the logistics side of things. So I will plan to hang back in here in the main space in case anyone needs help. But for the rest of you, I will see you back here in 10 to 15 minutes or so. And you can just give me a moment. I'm going to do my best to get you all into your breakout rooms. All right, folks, welcome back. Everyone should be trickling in shortly. Senator White's doing a little dance.
We had a great breakout session. I hate to say it, but you missed out if you weren't in breakout room 1. It was good. It was good.
Yeah, I felt lonely just hanging out in the main space, but I'm glad it went well. Do you want to share any takeaways from your discussion?
Well, I'll say that I learned about a new piece of legislation that is around ratepayers. And I'm going to be following up specifically with with one person to see about moving that bill and where it's starting in the House and if there's a chance for it to be in the Senate. So already legislative conversations are happening. And we got to see Bob the Green Guy. And if you have any interest in climate change, you got to root for Bob. So we're just happy to see his face whenever. And we did start out with Matthew bringing up some really good points around equity and access. So highlights from me from our breakout room would be those.
Awesome. Love to hear it. And yes, we love Bob. Thank you for being here this evening. Do any of the other legislators on the call want to share any takeaways from their breakout sessions? Totally not required, but if you'd like to share, I'm happy to give you the floor. Yeah, I see Representative Williams. Go for it.
Sure. One thing that was highlighted was the need to not ignore our federal delegation and be very communicative with them down in DC as to what our needs are and opinions are on climate advocacy. We also got some questions about the affordable heat standard and inquiries as to whether certain decisions would be left up to the PUCs. We had discussions around renewable energy credits. Honestly, the people in the room were much smarter than me. So, but it really great questions and some strong thoughts on our work.
Well, that's great to hear.
And I would just say, you know, Representative Williams and anyone who is in that breakout group as well, this is the start of the conversation on the bill this session. And if you have detailed questions about the bill, we're going to be taking testimony on the Senate side for a few more. You know, we're trying to get the bill out and send it over to the House, but we're going to hold on to it for a little bit. So at least until February, we're going to be taking some very particular testimony. So if you have questions, please reach out to members of Senate Natural Resources. If you have your senator on that committee, that's your best bet. If you don't have someone who represents you who serves on that committee, you're welcome to reach out to me. Then on the other side, the House will be taking it up if we have the fortune to pass it in the Senate, and you'll get another shot at it to ask even more detailed questions. And I know Representative Williams will be one of those folks advocating for those. So.
Wonderful. Thank you, Senator. And luckily, for those who do have questions, we are going to switch gears into a brief Q&A. But before we do that, I do want to give other legislators a chance to share if they want to. So Representative Cole or Buss, if you are interested, feel free. Yep, I see that hand, Representative Cole. So go for it.
Sure. I think we had a very interesting dialogue in our group, particularly surrounding messaging with some of these bills that we're pushing forward. I think we all want the same thing. We want a green and a clean environment. And so the way we talk to one another, providing awesome new, studies and advice for the best ways to push this project forward is wonderful, but we can't lose sight of strategy as well, especially having lost by one vote in the previous, for the clean heat standard. I think just being conscientious of that and also taking in everyone's ideas, because I think we all bring different expertise to the table, but pairing that with strategy and how we're going to get any change enacted versus risking not having any if it's too, if certain parts don't appeal to certain parties. So I appreciated that point coming up for sure.
Awesome. Well, I'm really glad that these conversations were useful and beneficial and thought-provoking. I am sad that I missed out on them, but I'm very happy for you all. It seems like Representative Buss is possibly, oh, there you are. Okay, awesome. Would you like to share?
Sure. I'm sharing from my car, my electric car, because I was traveling and the room that I chose to do this work the internet did not work like I expected. So we talked a bit about electric vehicles and the entire full cost of ownership, and helping to explain to people that it's not just about buying a car that's $200 a month that costs you $300 a month to drive it because of fuel. If you look at electric vehicles as the payment mostly covering your entire driving cost in the payment itself, it helps people to understand. So we talked a lot about just framing climate to help folks that aren't in it like we are to have a greater level of accessibility to the concepts.
That's amazing.
Cool. Representative Buss, thank you for that. And I think we can all, it actually hits right on what Representative Cole was saying as well, is trying to make sure that we're communicating effectively on what we need to do and the benefits that we will see from proactively responding to the climate crisis versus the detriments of waiting. And that's both individual and like on a big society level too.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Of course, as you know, you were in a breakout room, likely with just one legislator. So now is a great opportunity that if you have questions for others or just for the general group, you can feel free to ask them now. So you can feel free to type those questions into the chat box and I can read them out loud for our legislators to answer. So take a moment to think about any of your burning questions and fire away. And we'll spend the next 10 to 15 minutes or so doing that before we wrap up for the evening.
Oh, and Rep Cole was brave enough to put her email in there. Oh, we're getting more Bob Farnham love.
All right, so I'm seeing a statement, but I'm sure there's some questions. Okay, is our messaging designed for Vermonters 101 or in-house consumption?
Oh, Bob, when you say in-house consumption, do you mean
Senator White, I think you muted yourself halfway through.
Oh, my apologies. So are you saying in-house consumption? Are you talking about like actual house, or are you talking about state house?
I think in the club conversations.
In the club conversations.
I've seen most of these faces before, and I think we're at a point in this process of change with all this money coming into the state to really start messaging for the average Vermonter. They have questions. I've given people a ride in my electric car and let them drive it and stuff, and they say things like, well, I was thinking about getting one of these, but don't they catch on fire? Or, and just, it doesn't take much to get them over the hump to start to consider more seriously. So I'm just curious if what we are all doing in our conversations, I go to the conferences and we're all there and we all are talking to each other, but I don't know. I don't see a lot other than this series that you guys have done, a lot of outreach to the, voters, Vermont residents. And I just think it's going to be necessary because a lot of people struggle with change. And if we can help them sort of see what the future is going to be like and answer their questions ahead of time, so they don't have to feel stupid about what an acronym stands for, or how does a heat pump work? I don't want to ask that question, if just because you don't want to look stupid,
Yeah,
and
I hear you.
Yeah. So I just think that
we're
closer to a tipping point than we realize. And so the faster we can make that transition happen, the better. And I think we're close enough so that it's time to really craft our message, or have somebody crafting a message this is how it works. This is what we're doing. These are the people that are the players in the game, and helping people have that epiphany where they go, oh, I get it now. Because once they have that epiphany, they can never go back to the way they were before.
Bingo. I'll give a shout out. I think there are some phenomenal organizations who are taking on that work. I think the Keep Vermont Cool campaign is a big part of it. And I hope, you've got a really good slate of legislators here, but the Climate Solutions Caucus has, last I counted, over 80 members.
That's awesome.
And each one of those folks ideally is an active member of their community speaking truth to power on climate change. So I think that what we can sometimes struggle with as a movement, as a body, is that people do have assumptions or preconceived notions about people who are working to fight the climate crisis, or who are so-called environmentalists, as they might say. There's this perception that we're a group of people who are elitist or out of touch. And I think sometimes we don't help ourselves in that regard. And that's because we can kind of live in those closed spaces, to your point. So I do think that it's about including every Vermonter in the conversation. And what I've been really impressed by actually has been the youth movement on this front. I think when we've had youth who have shown up in the State House, or like the Youth Climate Lobby has been out talking to their community, that just resonates so strongly. So I guess my only point I'd make for what you said, Bob, is just intergenerational work. And if folks are thinking about that, it's a good place to start. But let's take now you guys have so many questions. We pause for a minute and you're so excited. So Jordan, what are the other questions that we got?
Yeah, absolutely. So next in the queue, I was disappointed by the one vote short of passing the Clean Heat Act. Am I correct that this new one is worth waiting for?
Gary, you asked the best questions. And I am still heartbroken by the loss of that one vote. I mean, anyone who knows me, I mean, I called my husband like sobbing, it was such a deep defeat. And I'm starting to feel that there is a silver lining. And that's that the bill itself, this new version, the Affordable Heat Act, is better than the last bill. Do I think that some of the changes we made could have been addressed through the rulemaking process, could have been addressed through the long process of the program being created? Yes. However, we're being a little more prescriptive in this bill and responding to things that we heard from folks and prioritizing, as I said before, low and moderate income Vermonters. So I do think that the changes were worth the wait, with a heavy heart. So we got to do it this year, guys. I'm not calling my husband crying. I'm not doing it.
There have been enough tears.
Enough tears.
All right. Do other representatives want to add to that part of the conversation, or should we move on to the next question? Just want to make sure that all feel like they can speak. All right, great. So moving on, can we develop time of day net metering, as in compensate EV owners for contributing battery storage to the grid?
Oh, the word can, yes, we definitely can do that. How will that happen? Good question. We have a special rate. I think, Representative Williams, do you have an electric vehicle? I can't remember if you do too.
I do.
Yeah. Do you? We have a special. We have a special rate through Green Mountain Power, but it's not related to our battery being used as storage. Although that feels like the next step. It's a charging rate.
It's the overnight charging rate from 9 to 7 a.m. It's like 13 cents a kilowatt.
Yeah.
So do you? That's fairly common is when you use power. But I'm a little more familiar with New York's policy, where they're like, we need many, many, many gigawatts of battery storage connected to the grid. And that could be fulfilled by EVs, but only if people's cars are acting as capacity for the grid. And I don't think any state has developed a policy to enable that.
It is in the future a little bit. The technology isn't in every car. Like the F-150 Lightning, the new Ford pickup truck, has that functionality in it where you can run your house on your truck. But not very many other cars have that technology built into them. I mean, it could happen really quickly if there was a drive for it. No pun intended.
Yeah, I would say that's a very important policy that we should develop. One thing to know about kind of the difference between the legislative body, the Public Utilities Commission, and then our utilities is that we don't set the rates as a legislative body. The Public Utility Commission, they hear rate cases. So this would be something to advocate to your utility about. So Green Mountain Power, although there are ways, I believe we can direct, there's ways within like the renewable energy standard that we can do some work on asking and promoting our utilities to do things, but I'm not quite sure. I don't think we can get that granular and make requirements like that, but I'm going to take this question back with me to the State House tomorrow and ask our Ellen Tchaikovsky, who's our legislative counsel, on that one. But I know Representative Williams has some other EV related stuff he's working on too. So maybe we'll team up.
Maybe. Sure.
Maybe, just maybe. Okay.
All right. That's all wonderful news. So following question. Question is, with advancements of technology, how can we use this within the climate change system of Vermont, and how can we support this and be proactive with Vermont's outdated system?
Oh, that's a big question. I'd say that question touches every sector. It talks about electricity, transportation, how we heat and cool our homes. Yeah, I would say what we need to do as a state is be open to innovation and not being stuck in kind of our traditional ways. We've always done something one way. Let's continue to do it that one way. And I'm actually really impressed with how Vermonters have been excited around electric vehicles, how they've been excited about heat pumps. And I at times, to your point before, Bob, is I do think a lot of Vermonters I need to see it before I believe it. kind of people. So I think what our job is as legislators is to make sure that the state is leading by example. And that's where you'll see like the institutions committee on the Senate side or institutions on the House side, having the state actually move forward with innovative stuff first and kind of mentor the rest of the state and show how we can implement different strategies for climate reduction. And we've seen that with electric vehicles. We've seen it with weatherization. So that's the way that I see us addressing as a legislature, but I don't know. Representative Cole, you're in an exciting industry for changing outdated systems, ag, food systems. I mean, we've been doing it one way for the whole time. That's
absolutely. Cool. Yeah, I think one interesting climate related piece that we are bringing into our committee that perhaps wasn't as focused on before was is keeping our soils healthy, which I'm really excited about too, especially when it comes to climate related disasters like increased flooding occurrences. Healthy soils are better able to retain water and prevent destruction elsewhere in the surrounding area. So that's going to be a huge piece. Also, in periods of drought, having that retention is going to be critical for sustaining crops for a longer period of time. But there's so much in the Ag Committee, and forestry, of course, is another piece. And the food piece, making it full circle all around. There's a lot to work with in that group.
Using new technology, yeah.
And if I may just add, Senator, I think, the legislature is very focused on addressing the housing crisis at the moment, and certainly integrating some of these climate-minded best practices in while we address the housing crunch is absolutely essential as we navigate, developing larger numbers of multi-unit dwellings, duplexes, triplexes, et cetera, and certainly weatherization best practices, solar, all of those things are top of mind as we seek to address the influx of people that have come here throughout the pandemic and the anticipated influx of people that will likely come here as climate refugees. So certainly we have to thread that needle.
Good point.
All right, moving on to the next question. Does the governor know about the Climate Council?
Does the governor know about the Climate Council? That is either the most shady way to ask that. And if that is how whoever meant to ask that asked it, I say, well done. But the governor, I want to take a moment and say that for whatever the disagreements are that we have with Governor Phil Scott on adopting climate policy, I would give him credit in the fact that he has taken seriously the process of the Climate Council, and he is aware of them, and he has responded to the Climate Action Plan, and he has staff that are really, really big climate champs. I think about Secretary Julie Moore. I think about Jane Lazorchek, who's now ahead of the climate department. So we are seeing that he's responding to the Climate Council. So he is aware of their existence. And my hope, and I'm trying to be as optimistic as possible, I think this year we're going to be able to come to some agreement. We're going to be able to do some real negotiation on the bill. So I'm optimistic that our working relationship with the governor will improve. And he called it out in both his inaugural speech and his budget. I think where we bump heads is how fast do we need to get this done, and who are the people that we're prioritizing. And that's always going to be a tension between the legislature and the governor. We just have different stakeholders that we listen to at the same time. So I hope he listens to the number one recommendation of the Climate Council, which was to pass a clean heat standard.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Senator. All right, I think we have time for a few more questions and then we can wrap things up. Are there any plans for some sort of major interstate climate initiative?
interstate climate initiative. So I would assume that's like a regional compact of some sort. Yeah. So the Transportation Climate Initiative, TCI, was the big one that we'd been talking about that was actually identified by the Climate Council it was, I believe, their number 2 or their number 1 sector based, at least for the transportation sector. Because of how a few other states had dropped out, and then ultimately our governor did move forward with it, it basically died as a policy, as a regional cap and invest solution. Out of that, we're re-engaging those conversations. The TCI conversation is back. We've rehabilitated it in some respects, given a little juice. Where that's going to go, I don't know. I'm optimistic on that one as well, but I think a lot of we had some folks, I think it was the Rhode Island delegation, we were at a conference that said they felt like they were left at the altar by some of the other states, and that's hard to get over. So hopefully we'll be able to pick that back up. There's the Western Climate Initiative, which is another angle we could explore. Yeah, I would say that's kind of where I know. That's the end of my knowledge.
Awesome, thank you. And I'll close it out with this one last question. WEC discourages solar panels because of net metering causing higher electricity prices for those who cannot afford solar panels. Can the net metering requirements be changed to become more equitable?
That's an interesting one. WEC is Washington Electric Co-op. And I don't, I don't necessarily agree with the argument that they've been making that by someone else going solar and then compensating that ratepayer for their net metered solar, that then it makes the rates for non-solar customers go up. I don't necessarily buy that argument. However, I do trust that our electric utilities are trying to keep rates low. They're trying to support their customers. So we do need to find a way that they can have solar and have net metering without feeling that they then would be pressured to raise rates on their customers. That's going to be what the renewable energy standard really, that's the tension that they're going to be trying to resolve. And I hope that we can work with our smaller utilities like WEC, who are, last I heard, I think they are considered 100% renewable, or that they buy renewable energy credits to be considered 100% renewable. That might be VEC though. Apologies if I'm getting my VEC or WEC mixed up. So they're on board and we do need to support them. But yeah, I would say the renewable energy standard is where we're going to have that conversation.
Awesome. Thank you, Senator. And thank you to all of the legislators for answering these questions. And of course, to everyone who was asking questions. As you saw, there are lots of legislator emails in the chat, so you are more than welcome to send your questions to them there. But because we are running short on time, I'm going to zoom through these last few slides that we have for you so we can let you all go and enjoy the rest of your evening. All right, so next, this slide is particularly important because it gives you a few action items to leave with. So first and foremost, what can you do? So you can review the advocacy one-pager that should be entering the chat at any moment now. My wonderful colleague Jane will be popping it in there for you, and I will be following up via email as well, so you will have your very own copy of it. But aside from that, we do encourage you to encourage your elected leaders to join the Climate Solutions Caucus. That is a wonderful action item that you can do literally right after this call if you so choose to do so. But that would be a huge help for all of the policy work that we are doing here in the state. You can also answer the following question in the chat. How will you advocate for climate action in 2023? Or if you don't know, take some time to think it over and make this a bit of a mantra for you. So thinking about the different ways that you can advocate from everything that you've heard and learned this evening. You can also follow us at Keep Vermont Cool. We are on all the social media pages, and that's how you can learn and stay tuned for all of our additional events and opportunities that are coming up. So I certainly encourage you to do that. And then finally, I just want to give a huge shout out to all of our legislators, attendees, organizational partners. And of course, thank you to VPIRG and BNRC for supporting this ongoing series. And finally, I will put our contact info up on the screen if you would like to collaborate or chat offline. Senator White and I thank you so much again for taking the time to be here, virtual or not. It takes a lot of effort to participate in any kind of webinar, so we really do appreciate that. And I hope you all have the most wonderful evening. We will see you soon. Take care.